Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. Every touch is a step forward. By Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom. And by Real Good Foods. Real food you feel good about eating.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, OneDrop made a name for itself with a beautiful design. In fact, it's the only diabetes device in Apple stores. But founder Jeff Dachis shares that the mission goes far beyond just looking good.
There's only a small group of people that are going to be able to, but not one, afford, but then access fully automated insulin delivery. What I'm doing is helping the rest of everybody else get advanced collision avoidance, advanced insights, advanced access to education and information that they didn't have before.
Jeff explains all that OneDrop really does and shares his frightening diagnosis story. We also talk about his past as an early internet innovator. We're talking early 1990s. In Tell Me Something Good this week, a little boy gets a new friend at school and his parents get some serious peace of mind. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of Diabetes Connections. I'm your host, Stacey Sims. We aim to educate and inspire by sharing stories of connection. And before we jump in this week, I want to make a correction. This is actually for a show 2 episodes back now, but it's important just to mention it here. I had done a great interview. Well, she was great. The interview with Carson Wedding. Carson is one of the first people to use the DIY loop system with Omnipod. And I had said in the episode that she was the first. Now, Carson was probably the first teenager. She's 16 years old now, and she started on the DIY loop Omnipod system about a year ago. But as with most things DIY, it's really hard to determine who was actually first. And that was my assumption. So her parents let me know, and a couple of other people from the We Are Not Waiting and Night Scout community let me know that they don't really like to talk about who's first with these things because, look, it's hard to determine. They're also not looking for credit. I was looking to put that news spin on it, right? You know, that tease, hey, first person, you know what I was doing there. But I really thought she was, and I appreciate everyone who pointed it out. So thanks again to Carson for not only doing this, I mean, basically being a guinea pig, although she was calm, cool, and collected, but also for talking to me. She's a very articulate young woman, and I do appreciate her family being so helpful in sharing the story. This episode is going live October 1st. If you're listening today, welcome to October. I bring that up because The World's Worst Diabetes Mom, my book, we are this close to the actual launch. So please stay tuned on social media. I can tell you right now, the big launch on Amazon and nationwide is November 3rd. And I'll be doing some fun Facebook Live stuff for that. You'll be hearing more about it. But I have some events I'm going to, and I'm talking to my publisher right now about will I have the books in hand for that sort of thing? Will I be able to have them on the website soon? So please stay tuned, follow me on social, or hang out in the Diabetes Connections Facebook group, and I will let you know. I can't believe that we're really finally here. It has been a long time and a lot of hard work coming, and I'm so anxious to see what you all think. Oh my goodness. I do have a funny story to tell you this week, and it's about Law and Order. Yeah, the TV show. Dun dun, like that Law and Order. But I'm going to tell it at the end of the show because I want to get to Jeff and OneDrop. He has a lot of great information to share. It is a longer interview, but please come back at the very end and you can hear this. Benny and I were watching Law and Order, and it involved insulin, and it did not go as we expected. And I will tell you the whole story at the end of the show. Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. And, you know, when Benny was very little and in the bathtub or at the pool, I always noticed his fingertips, right? You know what I'm going to say here. They were poked so much that they were just full of little pinprick holes. And you really could see that when they got wet. I mean, they just looked awful. He is 14 now. I do not see his hands close up that much anymore. But when I do, I noticed that his fingertips looked normal. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but he the other day was like, is this a wart? And he has a little bump on his thumb that we're going to get checked out. But I couldn't help but notice that his fingertips looked beautiful. It is a wart. It's gross. Anyway, we've been using Dexcom for 5 years now, and with every new iteration, we've done fewer and fewer finger sticks. The latest generation, the Dexcom G6, eliminates finger sticks for calibration and diabetes treatment decisions. Just thinking about doing 10 finger sticks a day in the past makes me so glad that the Dexcom has helped us come so far. It's an incredible tool. If your glucose alerts and readings from the G6 do not match symptoms or expectations, use a blood glucose meter to make diabetes treatment decisions. Learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. My guest this week is the CEO and founder of One Drop, they say, helping people navigate diabetes together, one drop at a time. And you probably heard the news that over the summer, One Drop became the only diabetes device currently at the Apple Store. Yeah, you can walk right into your Apple Store in your mall or wherever and buy the One Drop kit. And it looks beautiful, but there is so much more to this than just a beautiful looking device. Now, Jeff Dachis was diagnosed as an adult. And as you'll hear, his diagnosis was not handled very well at all. We hear this a lot with people who are diagnosed as adults. You know, here you go, you're on your way, you're fine, see you later, bye. And in part, it was that lack of initial care that led him to found One Drop. Interestingly, though, Jeff really has a background as an innovator. In the early days of the internet, he was doing things that people didn't think possible. One more note before we jump into the interview here. You're going to hear Jeff get really mad. He is fed up with the pace of diabetes innovation or the lack thereof. And I didn't respond. As I listened back to the interview, I listened back to all the interviews, I was really disappointed with myself because I didn't engage him on that. And I disagree with him, but it's not really fair to do after the interview. I get what he's saying, I really do, and you'll know when you hear it. But I'll talk about it a little bit more after the interview. But I bring this up here because it was a kind of a missed opportunity for me to really engage him more. And I'm mentioning it because, frankly, I think it sounds a little weird. Only on my end. He sounds fine. But you'll notice as you listen, maybe I shouldn't have said anything, but if you're a longtime listener, that's not how I roll. If I'm thinking it, you're probably going to hear it. Okay, here is my interview with One Drop's founder, Jeff Dachis. Jeff, thanks so much for joining me. I'm excited to have you on the show, your first time here. Thanks for being with me today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk to you.
All right. So exciting news earlier this summer when you all announced that it would be in Apple stores. Now, I know it seems really kind of flashy and exciting, when we look at the news releases, like, wow, diabetes stuff mainstream. But from your perspective, why was this so important? Why did you want to be in a retail location like that?
Well, first and foremost for our business, retail distribution is a great opportunity to get our product in the hands of an audience that may or may not be seeing it online or may or not be seeing it at their doctor's office or in different types of communities. So, retail distribution is a great opportunity for us to, get our products in the hands of more people and have people be more aware of it. The fact that Apple, one of the world's premier brands, one of the world's brands that is known for not only high quality, but an amazing user experience and something that people love, to be partnered with Apple, which we are in many, many ways across Apple Watch, across the iOS ecosystem, using Siri shortcuts, integrating with health records, having a deep, deep integrated Apple experience, was only logical that extension would include being then now sold in Apple retail stores. And we've been on Apple online. We've been in, you could buy our products through Apple online for now, what is it? I think going on 2 years. But to move into physical retail as Apple's focus on health and wellness seemed like a logical step for us. And then when they invited us to be included in Apple retail, we jumped at the chance.
Yeah, and everything in the Apple Store, has that look. Everything's beautiful and slick and almost futuristic, and you fit right in there. I don't know if you could tell us this, but did you have to work with Apple to look a certain way or change anything? It doesn't seem that way as I look at it. It looks like the regular One Drop package that you always had that look.
We did have I'll call it an Apple-esque or Apple-influenced look and feel originally, so that is the case. However, there are certain things that Apple wanted to change. Some of that involves internationalizing our packaging. So you'll see us internationally with Apple early next year. And that's really exciting. So that way in which you can bring a product to not just the U.S. markets, but to multiple markets and having, sort of internationalized packaging. That was one thing that they requested of us. Another thing that they requested was a unique opportunity. And so there is, in fact, a now new Apple-specific package that offers a specific Apple-related offering. And we include a year's worth of coaching with every Apple meter sold. So when you go into the Apple store and you buy our glucose meter and you pair that meter with OneDrop, you automatically are enrolled in and have access to a personalized, dedicated, one-on-one certified diabetes educator coach with your Apple purchase. And that's sort of really cool. And we merchandise that on the Apple-specific packaging.
Wow. Yeah, the system is much more than a meter. I mean, it's a beautiful meter. It's a beautiful set, but there's so much more to it. And let's talk about that in a couple of minutes. But I jumped right in because I was excited about the partnership with Apple. But let's back up and talk to us a little bit, Jeff, about your story. Because your diagnosis with type 1 diabetes really came out of the blue. I mean, I don't know too many adults who say it wasn't a surprise. But your story is pretty unique and a little, from what I've read, kind of scary what they did. Can you tell us the story about when you were diagnosed?
Sure. And you're right. I was terrified, one, and two, total shock. So, me just kind of going about my daily life, I run a lot. I'm a runner. I eat really good. And I ended up feeling really sluggish for several months, like just all of a sudden. And I'll tell you, it was a February, and I went to the doctor and I had perfect blood glucose values. So they always, do your blood workups when you go to the doctor. And I had February, I had a sort of great blood glucose. And then kind of March, April, May, I start to feel really sluggish and really weird. My runs are really hard. I can't seem to access any energy. I don't have any energy. And go through June and then July. And then in August, I was just like, wow, I'm losing a lot of weight. I lost almost 30 pounds in 8 weeks. And I was, had to pee a lot, and I was drink thirsty all the time, ravenously thirsty, unable to satisfy my thirst. And so I asked my nephew, who happens to be a physician, what's going on with me? And he goes, you have diabetes probably. You should probably get that checked. And I was like, why would you say that? What would make you think that I have diabetes? He said, well, you clearly have all the symptoms of diabetes. Go get that checked. And so I went into the doctor's office with a GP, and he said, wow, I'm going to send you to an endocrinologist today, and I want you to get checked. So I went into the endocrinologist, and I walked in, and I got about 6 minutes with a nurse practitioner and an insulin pen and a prescription and a pat on the back, and I was out the door with type 1 diabetes. What?
It is unbelievable. And you're not the first adult I've talked to. When we have our kids diagnosed, you stay in the hospital for 3 days. You get all this education. But I've talked to so many adults who were, given a pen. I talked to an adult. He was diagnosed. They gave him a pen, but they didn't give him any pen needles. He didn't know he needed pen needles. And he's at home trying to figure out, how do I get this in my body?
What do I do?
What did you do?
Well, that's the question. Like, what do I do? What should I do? I went home and I cried. I mean, I sat down and I sort of slumped down against, the wall next to my bed, and I cried. Honestly, I was terrified. I have 2 young kids. I have a lovely wife and a family, and immediately all of the bad things start to go through your mind. Of course, all of the things that are horrible, all of the things that can happen that you dread. And moreover, it's at that moment where it felt like this dark black velvet wet blanket was on my head. Like I couldn't see in my mind, in my mind, all of the dark thoughts, all of the things that could be horrible that could happen to you went through my head. Of course, what if I died? And what if all of the, what were my kids going to do? And now do I, we weren't prepared for this, sort of dark emergency. I really just was terrified. Honestly, I spent about 3 days just in a kind of a bad place, wondering what was I going to do and how was I going to navigate this. And later that evening, oddly, we had to go to a wedding reception, a wedding and a reception. And I didn't know what to do with like the food, insulin situation. Like what was I needed to bolus for food that we were going to eat at the wedding cake specifically. And so, I went into the bathroom and I sort of slumped down in the bathroom stall and laid my stuff out on the bathroom floor like a junkie and tried to figure out how to both check my blood, change the pen needle, dose the right amount, to all of this stuff that you have to do. And I didn't know how to do it. Sitting there in the bathroom wondering, like, is this going to be my life for the rest of my life? And it is, by the way. It is going to be my life for the rest of my life. And am I going to be shooting up in a bathroom stall every meal, for the rest of my life? I didn't know what to do. I was completely baffled.
Well, what changed it for you? Because obviously you've gone from 0 to 60 here, a little bit of a change. But what did change it for you? Do you remember what helped you turn it around? Right back to Jeff in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. Handwriting your blood glucose levels is the ultimate throwback. The One Touch Vario Flex meter seamlessly syncs with the free One Touch Reveal mobile app to create your dynamic electronic logbook. And when you choose the One Touch Reveal mobile app, you'll be joining thousands of other people living with diabetes. In fact, as of this past October, One Touch Reveal was the #1 downloaded diabetes management app in the US, Canada, France, and the UK. To upgrade today to the One Touch Vario Flex meter and One Touch Reveal mobile app, visit diabetes-connections.com and click on the One Touch logo. Now back to Jeff talking about how he started to turn things around.
So I started to put some of the pieces of the puzzle together, and it took, which is a little bit strange, but it took me about 3 days to get my blood sugars under control. I went from probably in the 500s. So I went into the doctor's office and I had a 15 A1C and somewhere in the 500 blood sugar range, which is obscenely high.
Of course.
Right? And then I was kind of in the low hundreds, below 100, 3 days later, and pretty much have stayed there. I sort of started to put together the relationship between food, medication, physical activity, and then the other things that can affect your blood sugars. And I started thinking to myself, I wonder if my experience in putting these pieces of the puzzle together could be turned into some kind of software application that we could bring to help a lot of people understand the dynamic and relationship between food, insulin, medication, physical activity, and all the other sort of biomarkers that you have in your life, and maybe make some sense of it for people. And that's really was the genesis of One Drop. I started thinking about it, and I spent over a year really noodling on this idea, wondering if it was possible, wondering if you could bring together all of the data needed to make good choices in a timely way and potentially even predict what I need to do in the future to avoid problems before they even happen. And that really was the genesis of One Drop and how we started to think about this new data-driven way to manage health conditions.
It's interesting to me, the more people I talk to in our community, everybody brings whatever kind of talent or background they have to the diabetes community. I talk into a microphone. People
Yep.
who are engineers bring their stuff, that kind of thing. You brought some very specific and interesting skills to this. Let's go way back and talk to me about Razorfish. Because as I read this, I assumed when I said, founder of Razorfish, I assumed this was a company, in like the early 2000s or maybe like around the time of the iPhone. But no, this is a company that is credited to have the first or one of the first animated home pages. I mean, imagine when the internet didn't move, people, right? This is so funny to think about this, back in the olden days of the internet in 1994. Am I correct on this? Talk to me a little bit about Razorfish.
Yeah. Well, just oddly, I'm sitting in our Soho offices right now in New York, and I'm looking out the window at the first office of Razorfish from 1994. So I'm like, literally, I'm looking into the window of my first office where we started Razorfish in October of 1994. And so, yeah, it's been 25 years. Razorfish was a collaboration between me and my old business partner, Craig Canerick, who I still count as a close and dear friend and whom I love. And he and I were fortunate enough to be kind of in the right place at the right time, but also with some of the right skills to capture the beginnings of the internet. We created the first banner ad ever. I'm sorry to the audience out there who sees a lot of banner ads now, but we literally the first banner ad ever, the first web animation ever. We made this little blue dot bounce up and down on our page, and honestly, no one had ever seen anything like that before because it was the first time anything like that had ever happened. And then we had gone on to help many thousands of businesses establish their presence on the World Wide Web and on the internet. And I know people take a lot of that stuff for granted today, but before there were shopping carts and before there were banner ads and before there were all of the things that you now know today as your modern, sort of internet experience, Craig and I and a merry band of swashbuckling, technologists sort of created all of that stuff by hand originally. And Razorfish today now is about $2 billion in annual revenue. It's 20,000 employees in 100 offices worldwide. And it's the dominant design technology firm, in the world today. And so it's sort of, I'm very proud of the humble beginnings from Razorfish's 580 Broadway office that I'm looking into right now from my office just across the street.
I'm curious. I don't know if you can answer this, Jeff, but do you remember what the heck made you think back in 1994 that you guys could do that? That you could do anything, that you could make the internet move, that you could create banner ads. It was such an interesting time. I mean, people didn't have email. We didn't have social media. Do you remember kind of what was in your head at the time that made you think, yeah, we could do this?
Some of it was chutzpah. Some of it, was young naivete. And some of it was the right place at the right time. And then some of it was, I'll have to say, Craig, was an extremely talented guy, and I was just fortunate to kind of be with everybody at that time. We were in a unique time in New York City where, there was a spirit of something new was coming. There was drum and bass music. There was a cyber hacking scene that was what's called Freakers with a PH, Phreak, Freakers, that were subversively hacking into the phone systems and getting access to networks and things like that people didn't really know about. There was a music scene in, downtown New York. There was an art scene. You had artists and musicians and cyber hackers and freakers and technologists and finance and advertising and art and fashion all kind of coming together in this downtown creative scene that was burgeoning in a way that you couldn't have expected. And so we were kind of like just hanging out with the right people, going to the right places and trying to capture, this energy. I don't really know if there was anything other than a group of collaborative, creative people who were coming from different backgrounds downtown New York to create stuff. This is what emerged.
Yeah, I remember it very well. I was graduated from college at that time. I was in upstate New York, but I was working in news. I was working in newsrooms during college, and it was incredible to see, I was at a radio station that had you would edit with a razor blade and tape. Yep. And then in the next room, you were already transitioning to, I think this is going to start being digital. Yeah. What's that? It was really a remarkable time. So when you then fast forward to take all of that experience and look at diabetes when you were ready to, all right, I'm looking up now, that black cloud is kind of lifting, I'm figuring out how to do this for myself. When you looked around at the time, did you find anything available that you felt was helpful to you online or on your phone, or was it a vacuum that you felt that needed to be filled?
Huge vacuum. So first of all, and that's a great question, by the way, today's healthcare really still sits in these silos of money-making pots for the companies that produce them, but that deliver very little health or care. And I'm going to be a little bit hyperbolic here, but I have to say that if you look at the numbers, over the last 15 years, the world has spent about $800 billion a year, $800 billion a year on diabetes, the world. So globally, in the U.S., it's about $300 billion a year over the last 15 years. And the amount of improvement in the lives of people with diabetes has been, I'm sure you know the answer to this question, zero. There has been no improvement, none, negative improvement in the lives of people with diabetes over the last 15 years. And yet trillions of dollars of cash has flowed into the drug companies, the hospitals, the doctors, the environments, the device makers that serve people with diabetes. And yet there has been zero improvement. And that should make you angry. And it should make everybody who's listening to this angry that we are spending so much money on a broken healthcare system that can't seem to take that money and put it towards a place where I can improve my life with diabetes. And so when you look at the numbers, the broad numbers, and I'll get to the answer to your question, this should make everybody angry. And the fact that there's been so much rent extracted from the system and so little value delivered to you and me and to your son and to the people that have diabetes that may be listening to this podcast now, you should be angry about that. And so I thought to myself, when I was diagnosed with diabetes, of course there has to be somebody delivering a modern, integrated, data-driven diabetes solution to the market that everybody has access to on their mobile phone. Of course there is. I can order Chinese food right now and have it here in 15 minutes. I can order a car and have it here in 15 minutes. I can book a flight. I can do my banking. I can do a lot of stuff on my phone right now. But what I can't do is get access to my glucose information on this glucose meter that's sitting right next to me. Why is that the case? What I can't do is get access to the insulin amount that I just dosed from my insulin pen made by the 3 manufacturers of insulin, selling insulin globally, making billions of dollars in profits every quarter, and I can't get access to the data from that insulin pen on my phone? Why? That should make you angry, because the one thing that I can make decisions about is the relationship between my glucose information and my insulin to help me stay healthy. The physical activity that I track on my watch and on my Fitbit and on my Garmin and on my phone every single day, you mean I don't have access to compare the insulin that I'm taking to the glucose information, to my physical activity, the 3 things that matter for a person with diabetes? Why?
I'm listening and I'm nodding. It's the familiar story of looking at all this stuff. And, I hear it from the Night Scout people, why can't this thing talk to that thing?
Yeah, that's it.
The technology was so far behind.
Right. And it still is. But we decided to try to do something about that. You're right. And Night Scout, God bless them. And God bless everybody who is making an effort to try to do this stuff. When I first was diagnosed, there was an app called My Sugar, which I love. And thank you to the My Sugar guys and to Roche who bought My Sugar. I loved that app. And I thought there has to be a way to do this even better.
So tell me how you did it better. Tell me what OneDrop really is for people who are not familiar with it.
So OneDrop is sort of 3 core capabilities. 1, a connected ecosystem of health devices. Not just the OneDrop meter, which is gorgeous and makes you feel like a diabetes and is convenient and has test strips delivered direct to your door and enables you to connect to the OneDrop system seamlessly. That's part of it. But an entire ecosystem of connected devices, whether it's your Apple Watch or Siri or Alexa or thousands of other devices like Companion Medical's insulin pen or Dexcom's CGMs, all of the types of health devices that are out there, a connected blood pressure cuff, a connected scale, all of those devices, when you use them, all of that data flows seamlessly into OneDrop to give you a picture of your health data and information, a combined picture, a unique, sort of integrated picture of the stuff that's happening to you day in and day out, 8,759 hours a year that you're not at the doctor's office. That unique integrated picture from the OneDrop health device ecosystem, enables you to see things that perhaps you weren't aware of before, or make connections, or make, understanding and insights to things that you may not have understood before, because that data tells a really interesting story, which leads me to the next OneDrop, core capability, which is our AI-powered predictive insights.
Yeah, tell me about that.
There are nobody in the world today is delivering glucose forecasts to people. So I can tell you up to 12 hours in advance what your glucose values are going to be. Now think about OneDrop AI-powered insights as what we would say as advanced collision avoidance for people with diabetes. Your car knows when it's going to crash into something and gives you an alert or puts on the brakes. Your Teslas out there are mapping the road and mapping the journeys that people are on every single day, where the potholes are, where the on-ramps are, where the construction is, and is sending that data back to a brain at Tesla headquarters so that all people driving Teslas have access to that collision avoidance system for cars. OneDrop is delivering that same advanced collision avoidance system for people with diabetes. Each person who's on the OneDrop platform is helping all the people on the OneDrop platform avoid problems, because not just your data about you, but the data about everybody on the OneDrop platform is powering the OneDrop advanced AI and delivering insights to you to help you avoid problems in the future. And that's rooted in OneDrop forecasts, so where we predict what your blood glucose values will be in the future, and then delivering insights on what you can do about that forecast. Your blood sugars are going to go high. Well, here's what you can do to change that trajectory. Your blood sugars are going to go low. Well, here's what you can do to change that trajectory. And most people are flying blind.
I'm curious. So as a parent of a child with type 1 diabetes who battled a lot of lows yesterday because we just started wrestling, like that's a new sport for him. We're trying to figure everything out. You know, you've got intensive weights and then you've got intensive cardio. AI-powered predictive sounds amazing, but how would something like that work for somebody with type 1 who, frankly, you know, if you eat the same thing, you do the same level of activity, I can see it. I don't want to be a skeptic here, but how does it work for somebody with type 1 who may be eating different foods and having different activity day by day?
For somebody who's on intensive insulin management, like a type 1 juvenile, okay, we today at OneDrop can deliver advanced predictions for that individual. We don't today, and I'll be clear about that. For somebody who's on intensive insulin management, bolus basal therapy, and who is type 1 diabetic, we are not delivering glucose predictions for those individuals today. And there's a bunch of reasons why, and I can explain why, but mostly because what we don't want is somebody who's on intensive insulin management, type 1 diabetes, who's a juvenile, to be making dosing decisions based on our predictions right now. We have high confidence in those predictions, but we're not delivering them yet. There's a strange liability associated with that, right? So today, we are not delivering automated advanced predictions for people with type 1 on basal bolus therapy. So just to say, like, it doesn't work for people like your son right now, because we're not delivering them to people like your son right now. But for everybody else, type 1s, you know, who are on a little less intensive therapy, or all of the type 2s out there, which represent 90% of people with diabetes, we're helping them with insights and information that they didn't have before. And I realize that you probably look at the world through a juvenile type 1 lens. And there's a lot of technology out there and available for type 1. There's NightScout, obviously, which was a precursor to now the Open APS movement. Thank you to all of the people out there who have been contributing to NightScout, Open APS, Loop, Android APS, and now Tidepool Loop, and all of the stuff that's happening in the automated insulin delivery landscape to help automate insulin delivery for people with type 1 diabetes.
No, Jeff, I should just jump in and say my husband lives with type 2. And I am very outspoken on this show that while obviously people with type 1 and type 2 have different needs, I really do think we are one community. And to have technology like OneDrop for people with type 2 diabetes, which is an incredibly underserved, which is hard to say, it's hard to believe when you look at how many people there are, but in terms of technology, incredibly underserved community in terms of advanced technology and connectivity and things like that. So I think it's fabulous. Yeah. I just was trying to be clear on, you know, where it was used best.
So we think, again, there's plenty, like you said, there's plenty of technology available today for type 1s. I think, you know, the type 1 automated insulin delivery landscape is going to get even more robust. You're going to see even better approaches. There aren't that many people hacking their old Medtronic pumps and being able to deliver, Loop or OpenAPS or some of that fully automated insulin delivery landscape today. And there's companies like Bigfoot, or I'm blanking on the other name.
The Islet at Damiano's company.
Those guys are doing a great job focusing on automated insulin delivery. And again, that landscape is going to only be, available to a small group of people. There's only a small group of people that are going to be able to, but not afford, but then access fully automated insulin delivery. What I'm doing is helping the rest of everybody else get advanced collision avoidance, advanced insights, advanced access to education and information that they didn't have before. And then let me just further the OneDrop capability set, which I sort of got 2 of 3 things. 1, our advanced OneDrop connected ecosystem. 2, advanced AI-powered insights and glucose forecasts. And then 3, really one-on-one, dedicated, personalized care programs and personalized care coaching. When you subscribe to OneDrop, you get your own dedicated personal coach. I'm going to use Rachel as an example. Rachel's one of my coaches. Rachel, you sign up for OneDrop and you get Rachel 24/7, 365 on your phone, available to answer questions, help you solve problems, help you get to your goals with diabetes. And everybody's different, right? So a bot isn't going to be able to help you get to your goals. And a group session where you're lumped in with a bunch of other people isn't going to help you get to your goals. It's one-on-one, dedicated, personalized care that's going to help you manage your conditions, solve problems, set goals, achieve them, and get to your ideal diabetes management environment. And then let's say things change, right? Which they do, right? You get pregnant, or you're trying to lose more weight, or things change at school. I just started wrestling versus when I wasn't wrestling last semester. My coach is right there to help me navigate the changes required to manage my condition over time. And you get your dedicated coach for as long as you're a part of OneDrop. So you don't finish a program and then not have access anymore. You got your access forever. So personalized care programs and coaching, connected health ecosystem of devices, including the OneDrop meter and convenient stuff associated with being a diabadass, and then AI-powered insights and glucose forecasts really are the root of the OneDrop platform, all delivered on your iOS or Android device.
Let me ask you a question. You don't have to answer this. This might be a little too personal. I'm curious, you don't wear a CGM.
Correct.
Why is that? What's the preference there? I know the OneDrop system is great. I'm just curious as a person with type 1.
Yeah, that's a great question. And let me take my personal view about my own personal care outside of anything that we do at OneDrop. So you're asking me a personal question. I'm going to give you a personal answer having nothing to do with my role as the CEO and founder of OneDrop, which I believe in, emphatically. I control my diabetes largely through my food intake. And so I ascribe to a very low carb regimen. I have, eliminated most carbohydrates from my diet most of the time. And so when you reduce the amount of carbohydrates you consume, you also reduce the amount of insulin you need to take at any given time, both bolus insulin, which I rarely take, and then basal insulin, which is your long-acting insulin that you take at night. And when I reduce the amount of insulin that I take, I reduce the volatility in highs and lows. So I'm not going high very often because I'm not eating carbohydrates. And I'm not going low very often because I've consumed a lot less insulin than I normally would have. And so having addressed the input variables, with food and insulin, it's created just a remarkably low volatility diabetes experience for me. And so my need to have continuous glucose monitoring, which is valuable to a lot of people, my need for that is not as sort of intensive. And moreover, I'm not really interested in having this thing on my body that's beeping or alarming or that I have to deal with, or that I bump into the door and it tears off, or I just am not interested in having extra stuff on my body personally. Now, I've tried everything, by the way. So I've worn all of the CGMs, and I've tried pumps, and I have experienced all of those things. And as a personal choice to me, I've decided that I would rather address the inputs, food and medication, rather than be alerted to or have alarms about the output, my highs and lows according to what my CGM is telling me. I'd rather eat less carbs and have lower insulin intake and thus lower impact on the volatility associated with insulin than eat whatever I want, dose for it, which is the typical recommendation that a doctor will give to a person with type 1 diabetes. Eat whatever you want and then just dose for it. Well, guess what? People suck at estimating carbs, and people suck more at estimating the amount of insulin they need to correct for carbs. So that volatility that a type 1 experiences, eat whatever you want and dose for it, to me is not a dynamic or a risk I'm willing to take. So I have dialed back my input risks, and therefore my output risks are very low. And therefore, since I don't want to wear anything on my body, I don't really choose to wear a CGM. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you answering that. Thanks very much. Before I let you go, what's next for OneDrop? It's been a huge success so far, and the news just a couple of weeks ago of being in the Apple stores, huge seal of approval there, getting to more and more people. Where would you really like to take this?
There's a bunch of aspects to that question that I think, we can share and some stuff that we can't. We want to continue to transform the lives of people with diabetes in every possible way. So that's an original component of our core mission and something that just hasn't changed. The diabetes landscape is evolving. The commercial landscape is evolving. The technology landscape is evolving. The players in the industry are evolving. And we, of course, will evolve right along with that. But core and fundamental to everything that we do, to every touch point that we have, to every button we design, every component of the app, every aspect of our customer support team, to every, color on the packaging. Everything we do is rooted in a deep respect for the people that have diabetes, a deep sense of empathy, because I have diabetes and almost half of my staff has diabetes and everybody else has somebody related to them that has diabetes. So we're operating from a position of we know, respect, and have empathy for people who have diabetes and the associated conditions that are related to diabetes. And with that comes a lot of love in building products that hopefully will help transform the lives of people with diabetes in a positive way. And that's what's coming for OneDrop. More of that.
Jeff, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing your story and so much of it. It was really interesting to learn all about you. Thanks for joining me.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
I will link up more information about OneDrop at diabetes-connections.com or in the show notes. As you listen on any podcast app, there's always a little bit more information in all of those apps. And you see what I mean about Jeff getting angry and me sounding weird? It's not really fair to talk about it too much now that he's not here to answer me. But I will say that I think he's talking more about people with type 2 diabetes, because even though there's a long, long way to go, the last 10 years has led to innovation, if you're lucky enough to be able to pay for it and have access to it, in terms of CGM, in terms of, look at my son, in terms of Benny's insulin pump talking to the CGM. 10 years ago, Benny didn't have a CGM. He didn't have basal IQ. He didn't have Traceba, which wasn't around 10 years ago. So there are innovations. Is it slow going? Yes. Is it impossible for many people to afford and access? Yes. But I wish I had engaged him more, and maybe we'll have him back on and we can have that discussion. But I think too, with OneDrop, I think he sees the diabetes community in a different way than many of us, because he sees it, including the type 2 community, which is fantastic and which needs all of the innovation it can get. One more quick funny thing about OneDrop. We talked about this off the air, and I just wanted to let you know if you have this issue. So a couple of years ago, Benny got the OneDrop system, and he loves it. It's a really beautiful looking meter. It's very sleek. It's very, definitely appealing to the eye, but it hurt. He couldn't poke his finger without pain, which is unusual because we've used, and I'll tell you, we use the Delica, is the Lancer, I always get that wrong. The Lancer is the device. The Lancet is the little needle that goes in it. So we've always used the Delica, and he loves that. But the one-touch Lancer hurt, so we stopped using it. And I mentioned that to Jeff off the air, and he very nicely indicated that we might have been using it wrong. It turns out that many people do not put the Lancet incorrectly to the one-touch Lancer. We don't push it down far enough. And if you do that, you're not going to have any pain. So I told Benny, he was skeptical. He did it. He tried it. Voila. Pain-free. We were laughing about it. It's been sitting in a drawer for, it's got to be 2 years. So sorry, Jeff, we'll start using it again. But if that's been your experience, as with any diabetes device, if it's not working as advertised, let the people know and don't wait 2 years like we did. Dummies. It is time for Tell Me Something Good. One of my favorite parts of doing this show is hearing from you, all these great stories. Thank you for your emails and your social media posts. Tell Me Something Good is brought to you by Real Good Foods, and they make delicious, nutrient-dense foods, high in protein, low in carbs, grain-free, and made from natural ingredients. And I'll tell you what, they taste great and they are easy to find. It really is helpful to just go to the grocery store freezer and grab, a supreme pizza for Benny, or bring home some poppers. They have these bacon and cheddar poppers that are really good right now. And it just makes it easy when I can go right to the grocery store. Not everything is in the grocery store, so you can order online and get their whole variety. They also have recipes online, which I think is great. These are so easy to make. You just basically heat them up, but then you can get really creative and make more with them. They have great recipes online to help you do that. Find out more. Just go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Real Good Foods logo. Tell Me Something Good this week comes from Andy in Larchmont, New York. I had met Andy at Friends for Life. He had actually found the podcast shortly after his son's diagnosis. Dean is now 4 years old, and Andy writes in, Dean is approaching his first diversary just before Halloween. After his diagnosis last year, we felt we needed to move him to a different school with a full-time nurse. A tough decision and transition, but Nurse Pat was amazing. And Dean's new classroom was the next door over from her office. Unfortunately, Nurse Pat retired at the end of last year. 2 days before school began, we had a meeting with the new preschool director, new head teacher, new assistant teacher, and temporary district-provided nurse. All recent hires and all new to the school. And this was that meeting, he says, where you as a parent with no medical background have about half an hour to explain type 1, lows and highs, insulin, pumps, CGMs, juice boxes, and on and on. And then 2 days later, you're expected to put your child's life in their hands. Needless to say, it was a stressful time. And then he wrote, does this sound like a Tell Me Something Good yet? I love it, Andy. Well, just as the meeting began, the assistant teacher, a lovely young woman named Naomi, approached and revealed, you guessed it, she has type 1. What came next were emotions. Of course, I'd never wish the burden on type 1 on anyone, but I must say I've never been happier to hear those words. What a huge relief for us as parents. Now, Naomi and Dean text us a picture when their BGs are exactly the same. The school year is still new. We're still ironing out the routine and still waiting for the full-time nurse, but we could not be happier to have Naomi and Diane, the head teacher, and the wonderful staff at Westchester Day School there to support Dean. I'll also shout out JDRF for its great resources to help us prepare for those essential interactions with the school. All the best, Andy. Andy, thank you so much for letting me know how Dean is doing, for sharing that terrific story. And Andy also said he remembered that I had told the story that Benny's elementary school nurse had type 1 diabetes. And then we had told the story about the adult type 1 who was working at the golf course and his big boss came to see him because the boss had type 1. I think those stories are so incredible, not just because of the child or even the adult that has type 1 and then finds somebody at their workplace who also has type 1. Flip it around and think about the person, the nurse, the assistant, the boss, who's the person with type 1 and decides, I'm going to tell this person, I'm going to seek them out, I'm going to make a point. And I think we all understand why. We would all do the same thing. There is such power in this diabetes community. We are the only ones who know what it's like. And so when you find somebody else who has it, who lives with it, who gets it, why not point it out? Why not talk about it? And I love hearing from Andy. There's a couple of people I've met from the podcast from Larchmont, which is funny because I lived in Larchmont for 4 months. I know, such a long time, but I grew up not far from there. And I lived with my sister in Larchmont for 4 months in between college and getting my first job in Utica, New York. And I have a very fond place in my heart because I lived in Larchmont as I was doing my first real radio gig. I was working mornings at WFAS in White Plains, New York. I was filling in for the morning news person. She was out on maternity leave, and I got to fill her shoes for 3 months while I looked for a job and then finally found one. So thank you. There's a hot dog place in Larchmont that it almost looks like an old, the Chinese theater. Anyway, someone will tell me and I'll let you know. But that's so frustrating. All right. If you have a tell me something good story, please let me know. Ping me on social media. You can send me an email, however you want to get the news to me. And it can be about diabetes in the wild, spotting like that. It can be about a milestone or a diaversary, whatever's good to you. Oh, it's called Walter's Hot Dog Stand. Sorry. The place in Larchmont is Walter's Hot Dog Stand. If it's still there, let me know. Oh my goodness. Anyway, let me know your good news stories. Tell me something good. At the beginning of the show, I said I was going to talk about a Law and Order story. So here's what happened. Benny and I were watching TV together. Usually after dinner, if he's done with homework, he'll play some video games. He'll be on the phone with friends or whatever, TikTok or Instagram, whatever the kids are doing these days. But once or twice a week, he'll come upstairs and want to watch TV with us or want to watch a movie. So I was watching Law and Order, like I often do. I love that show. I think I've seen every episode. I've been watching it for years and years. I don't watch any of the spin-offs. I find them too gory and too scary. But at the end of the day, there's nothing like the rhythm of Law and Order. It's calm. I know what's going to happen. If Lenny Briscoe is in it, God bless Jerry Orbach, then I'm even happier. So he was in this episode. I had just turned it on and I actually knew what was coming. I had seen this one before. I thought I had seen it. And Benny walked in and said, "Hey, can I watch with you?" And my kids love Law and Order and they know that I watch it a lot. And he's like, "Yeah, come on in." So I said to him, "This one involves insulin." He said, "What is it? Watch, you're going to see." So it starts out with the husband is rushing his wife to the hospital and the wife dies. And he said to me, "Is this going to be a dead from diabetes story?" And I said, No. It's really creepy. You got to watch. The episode is called Stiff. And if you haven't seen it, I'm going to spoil it for you. So fast forward here, or I'll see you next week because we're almost at the end of the show, if you want to go watch it. But it's all about a guy who purposefully administers insulin to his wife. And I know you're thinking, well, wait a second. Wasn't that the Von Bulow case where he killed her by purposefully overdosing her with insulin? Yes. And that's kind of the jumping off story here, that they think maybe that's what happened. But it turns out it's really, and this is a little bit not suitable for kids in the car. If you're listening with your kids still by now, I should have given you a heads up on that. That's the heads up right now. It turns out that the husband is part of this really wacky sex ring, and they use the insulin to inject their spouse or their partner. And then when the person is low, they have this whole domination thing. I mean, what a crazy thing to watch with. Then there's my 14-year-old son in the room. Oh my gosh. So we're both watching the TV and trying not to look at each other. I had remembered bits of this episode, but I didn't remember all of it. Then there's a whole subplot with the daughter. It turns out the insulin wasn't the thing that killed the mom. It was something else, and the daughter was responsible. It was really creepy and gross. But it led to a very brief and interesting discussion about insulin overdosing, about the Von Bulow case, and about how disgusting and creepy some people are. So I feel like I got out of that one pretty easily, because it could have been even more uncomfortable. And I'm not sure Benny will ever watch Law and Order with me again. But I also think he appreciated the fact that I didn't try to hide this from him, that once we found out that it was a show that let's face it, used insulin in a creepy, heinous way, that I didn't, "Oh, you can't watch this. Oh, I want to shelter you from this." He and we have some very frank conversations anyway. And this one, I think, helped in a really weird and off-putting way. We have some interesting discussions anyway. So I will just add this one to the pile of things I never thought I would talk to my 14-year-old son about, because, oh my goodness, there are plenty of things with both of my kids that, when you get your parent manual, didn't we all get the parent manual? This was not in it. There are so many things that were not in that manual. And Law and Order, creepy insulin plotline was definitely not in that book. All right. I am going to Falls Church, Virginia this weekend. That is the Friends for Life Regional Conference. I am very excited. I'll have a vendor booth. I'm not speaking, but I will be making an appearance there. And then it just kind of rolls ahead. We've got a lot on the calendar. Do me a favor. At diabetes-connections.com, there is a community page that has the whole calendar of events through the end of the year, and I'll be adding into 2020. I've already got some stuff on the books that I need to add. If you'd like me to come and speak at your event, I promise I don't need to tell the Law and Order story. But I would love to come and meet you in person. I do a bunch of talks. I can do a live taping of the podcast, whatever is your pleasure. Just let me know, Stacey at diabetes-connections.com, or on that page, there is an appearance request form. Thank you to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here next week. Quick disclosure, at times I may mention Tandem Diabetes Care. However, I am not compensated by Tandem for my actions, and Tandem does not support or control this content. I have created the content, and it is based on my personal experiences and observations.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.